Nice. All right, well, it's after 1 o'clock. We can get started. Welcome to the City Planning Commission meeting of February 13th. I'll just go briefly through our procedures. We are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. So how this will go, we have a couple cases today. Typically, we have staff come up and introduce the case, and then an applicant come up. These two, the city planning department is the applicant, so we won't have that extra step. But after that, I will open the public hearing for anyone here from the public that would like to provide comment. You'll have 3 minutes and direct your comments to us. But before we jump into the case, let's do conflict of interest. Any conflicts of interest today? All right, seeing none. I'll turn it over to staff.
The first item on the agenda is an array of proposed zoning ordinance text amendments, and there's a handful of them, and they are being proposed for different reasons, so I'll go through the rationale as I go over the text amendments. I don't really have exhibits other than the proposed text. So the first one is proposed zoning ordinance text amendment that would allow a reduction in the minimum setback of an egress window well. This is something that we review very frequently in the planning and the building department. If you want to finish your basement, or if you want to add a bedroom in the basement or bedrooms, you need to have safe egress. And so this this requires the addition of an egress window well if there's not already one there. And that's something we'll often see in the older housing stock. And again, in the older housing stock, where we have our smaller lots, or in our TN neighborhoods mostly, we have a 5-foot setback in that zone district, and a window egress well, an egress window well needs to be at least 3 feet from the side lot line. A window well is typically about 3 feet. So that means you need 6 feet to put in a window well. And so what has happened over the last, what happens if folks really want to pursue this, they'll need to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance to go closer than 3 feet. Because the Board of Zoning Appeals has been approving all of them, that's a signal that we really need to address something in our zoning ordinance. In this case, staff put together a proposal to allow a window well to go no closer than 1 foot to the lot line. We all think that's pretty close. But there are some other standards that need to be considered for this administrative departure to be granted. So it's not just by right. You do need to ask for this, and you need to meet these standards. You have to show that there's no other feasible location for a window well. Maybe there's you've got a deck in the backyard, and then a driveway on the other side. So you really don't have any other space for it. And then we added a couple of other conditions that are really associated with building code. They reflect some of the things that building code requires. You still need to meet building code, but we added these in there so applicants would understand that they are required to meet them. They need a clear path to the public way. you need adequate fall protection to the adjacent walking surface. If it's too close, we don't want people to fall off the neighboring driveway into a 4-foot hole. And then also, again, if it's near a house, say, we want to make sure that it's not going to undermine the foundation of the adjacent house. So with that, we're proposing an administrative departure for egress window wells to allow them to be no closer than 1 foot to the lot line, provided these conditions are met. Do you have any questions about that? Okay, I will move on. The next section, it looks like there's a lot going on here in this non-conforming site element section. The green reflects that we've just moved things around. So the content hasn't changed. The content is just this section in red. And we felt that with the addition of this, this order would make more sense. So this, what we're proposing in this second text amendment is to allow the replacement of non-conforming off-street parking that's located in the front yard with an administrative departure. Would you mind closing that? Thanks. I'm easily distracted. Oh, it is? Okay, then. No, it's fine. Thank you. So this came, this text amendment came about by our two zoning plan examiners. This is something that keeps crossing their desk. I'm not sure that there have been many variances for that, but what's happening when you have a parking lot in a front yard where it's not otherwise allowed, if you want to replace the crumbling pavement, the zoning ordinance requires that everything be brought into conformity. So, and that can be really tough. That means that, sometimes you have to reduce the number of parking spaces. You have to provide all the requisite landscaping. So with this text amendment, we want to, we want to encourage the, folks to reinvest in their property. Please repave that parking lot. When you take out the parking, you've got to, meet the standards, but we want you to do that. So we'll allow you a little bit of latitude. And this is also as an administrative departure. And we want to, make sure that there's, again, no practical alternative for the parking spaces that are currently in the front yard. Sometimes you have a building that used to be a gas station. It's at the back of the lot. So there's no other alternative. We want to ensure they're not going to increase the nonconformities. We are going to require that landscaping is brought closer to conformity. And this is a little tricky, this last part. We want to allow those smaller parking lots, even if they exceed the required number of spaces, to just keep the number of spaces that they have. If by ordinance it's a small little building, they may only need 2 parking spaces. If it's in the TN zone district, if they have 6, that exceeds that 120%. But we're saying, you know what, if you have 20 or fewer parking spaces, you can keep them. It's only for those smaller numbers that they can stay. But they still need to, add the additional landscaping. Sometimes there are businesses that are really busy, or they have a lot of employees and they really do need those front yard parking spaces. We'll still let them, we will consider allowing them to keep those excess parking spaces if they do a parking demand study showing that they really do need those spaces. So this administrative departure is intended to encourage reinvestment and repaving of parking lots in poor condition, and recognizing sometimes that there are no other alternatives. And I think that going to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance is a barrier that folks don't want to pursue. So.
Elizabeth, are these mostly, would you say, commercial properties? These aren't residential streets?
Yeah.
Because I know I'm wealthy. You go by a number of where
Absolutely. I would say that
done
is.
gas stations.
There could be residential properties, sure. I wouldn't say, there could be apartment complexes, there could be some.
But they're mostly on commercial corridors, aren't they? And not what we would call residential streets, or are there some that way too?
I think the majority of the BZA cases, if not all, have been commercial
Yeah.
to support businesses.
So in residential zone districts, front yard parking has never been allowed.
That's what
So I wouldn't say, so they wouldn't, if it's like a single family home that has parking in the front yard, that was never allowed.
Okay.
So,
That's, I think, what I was getting
Yeah.
at is you wouldn't see people converting their grass into a parking lot.
no.
Selling out on a game day. Okay.
As far as the parking demand study, when they submit that, is there an additional review by the city to concur, like with the results of that?
Yes, that would be part of the requirements of that administrative departure. We'd say you need to have a professional conduct, or prepare this study, and you'd submit it with your application, and staff would review it.
Okay, thank you.
And that we refer to Section 51004A, and that's the parking demand study section of the zoning ordinance. Anything else? Okay. The next one is the Grand River Overlay District. This one is, I'm going to actually go to this section here. This is sort of embarrassing. The way we're planners. We are not really code writers, and when we wrote the ordinance, we inadvertently eliminated this section that's in red. So we're putting it back in. So the content is all the same.
And I think, though, that it does speak to two things. One is the need for a comprehensive rewrite, which, of course, we are working on. And what we're finding is that when you get close to a wholesale is dramatic, but a significant rewrite of an ordinance, we start to get asks from the development community that are entirely reasonable and aligned with our values. And so when we have applications that come in, even though it's well-intentioned, what we're finding is when other people write code sections for us, the chances of error unfortunately increase. And it's very difficult for us to catch them sometimes. So as much as we try, I think having a clean rewrite will be far easier, and we'll be able to integrate the sections better versus taking individual sections and trying to update them.
So this whole section on building elements is going to go back into the zoning ordinance. There's one other section that we are proposing to change. In the Grand River Overlay District section, it says that all uses in the Transitional City Center Zone District are allowed in the Grand River Overlay District. We're proposing to actually change that to whatever is in the, or you're allowed the uses in the underlying zone district. We've had, over the years, we've had a lot of rezoning of properties that were transitional city center to city center. And we think that it's more appropriate that the uses in those underlying zone districts control the uses rather than the transitional city center.
Yeah, this actually came up for those commissioners that were here on the dais previously about why is that in there and what does that mean? And we've spent quite a bit of time as city staff trying to understand the implications, and what we've concluded is that the current language doesn't seem to fit for the reasons that Elizabeth just mentioned. We've seen an expansion of our city center zone district, and so having this flexibility relative to other zone districts feels less critical today than maybe it did at the time the ordinance was authored, and sticking with the uses that are permitted in the base or underlying zone district seems like it's a more appropriate route at this point.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there was a concern related to self-storage in particular when we went through this the first time, so thanks for addressing that.
And the last amendment being proposed here is relative to solar panels. Currently, we allow solar panels on the street-facing side we allow solar panels on a street-facing side when, with an administrative departure. We really would prefer in neighborhoods not to have solar panels facing the street. However, you know what? Sometimes there's no other alternative, right? And so we've had several requests for administrative departures over the years, and we always approve them. So that's really saying that we should probably modify this and reduce the barrier to homeowners who want to add solar panels. We have received, I think, 2 letters of support from the public for this change.
I was glad to see this, and I think it really aligns nicely with the environmental things in the new plan that has been put together. So I think even though it's a step because of demand or something like that, it's in keeping with what overall we're trying to do.
And that is all for the zoning ordinance text amendments. And I'll be happy to answer any questions or turn it back over for public hearing.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Any other questions for staff on this? Okay, I will open up the public hearing. If you're here from the public and want to speak on this issue, make your way up to the mic. Seeing no public, I will close the public hearing and open it up for commission discussion.
Well, I think that, all of this is really, just cleaning up what already, and I'm glad to see staff bringing us things where, after a while, it just becomes repetitive and there's a demand out there and we're always approving them. Let's just make it part of the code than the exception. So I'm in agreement and supportive and congratulate staff for getting this to us. I'm sure we'll see a lot more in the next couple of years from the more massive, but it's a good start.
I don't really think there's much more to say. It appears very well thought out, and I appreciate the fact that we're changing as we see need for change, and all of it makes sense and was as easy. Yeah, so I support it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's in alignment with the master plan and the direction of development here, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness of reducing barriers for people to make these changes to their homes, so. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I can do it. Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission recommends that the City Commission approve the proposed text amendments to the zoning ordinance for the following reasons. The proposed amendments are consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance because the amendments support a number of recommendations and objectives of the 2024 Community Master Plan, including 1A8, provide adequate resources to meet community needs. 1B4, assess and reduce barriers to innovative housing solutions. 1C8, continue to promote the use of green infrastructure on individual home sites. And 3C, balance economic growth with priorities for the environment. The proposed amendments will enhance the functionality or character of the future development in the city because much of the property along the Grand River has been rezoned from TN-TCC to TN-CC zone district, and many TN-TCC uses are no longer appropriate. The proposed administrative departures will facilitate property owners' ability to make investments in their properties. Subjecting properties in the Grand River Overlay District to the uses of the base zone district will result in development consistent with surrounding properties. The proposed amendments will enhance the natural features and environmental integrity of the city because the amendment to Section 51115 alternative energy will allow for rooftop solar panels to be located on street-facing sides of a structure supporting green initiatives and alternative energy systems. The proposed amendments will protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the public because the amendments to allow administrative department departures for egress window wells and front yard parking, as well as street-facing solar panels, will reduce costs and time barriers for property owners. The proposed amendments are needed to correct an error or omission in the original text because the amendment to the Grand River Overlay District will reinstate text that was inadvertently eliminated during a 2023 text amendment. The proposed amendments will address a community need in physical or economic conditions or development practices because the egress window well amendment will allow for existing housing stock to be more fully utilized. The amendment will allow for the placement of rooftop solar panels in the location best suited for energy collection. The proposed amendments would not result in the creation of significant nonconformities in the city because replacement of front yard parking lots would be limited to situations where no other practical alternative exists. The parking lot is not expanded and landscaping is brought closer to current requirements.
Motion to have support?
Support?
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. All right, moving to our next case, another zoning text amendment.
This next request is to include the properties that you see on the screen on the west side of the Grand River on Front and Scribner, to include them in the Downtown Height Overlay District DH2A sub-area. So these properties were considered by the Planning Commission on December 14th, 2023 for rezoning from transitional city center to city center. The Planning Commission did recommend in favor of that, and the City Commission adopted that rezoning on February 20th of last year. Now, during the presentation, in the staff report, during the discussion, as well as during discussions with the affected property owner prior to us putting this amendment forth, we had implied and as well as explicitly said that this area would be in the DH2A overlay, height overlay district for downtown. Unfortunately, when we wrote the ordinance, we neglected to include that part. So the subject properties here are where I'm showing on the screen, and they would they would be DH2A, downtown height sub-area 2A, and that would be consistent with what is to the south of them, as well as to the east. That DH2A allows a maximum of 20 stories, and because that's what is around the subject properties, that would be the appropriate sub-area for them to be included in. So in sum, we're asking for the properties that were rezoned back about a year ago to City Center to be incorporated in the appropriate downtown height overlay district.
Okay, any questions for Elizabeth on this? Okay. Do you have anything to add? Okay, then I'll open up the public hearing. Anyone from the public, come and tell us your thoughts. Seeing no one from the public, I will close the public hearing and look to my fellow commissioners here. I'm sorry, this is a map amendment, not a zoning text amendment. I think it's pretty straightforward and is consistent with the conversation we had when we were recommending the rezoning of these properties. And as Elizabeth said, it's consistent with the other overlay district that nearby properties. But
I agree, and I'm happy to read the motion. Therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Commission recommends approval of the request of the Planning Department of the City of Grand Rapids to amend Map A Downtown Height Overlay District to include 748, 750, 830, 936, 942, 954, 1010, 1060, 1116, and 1155 Front Avenue Northwest, 260 and 282 Leonard Street Northwest, and 800, 832, 902, 934, 960, 1000, 1014, and 1030, 1044, and 1058 Scribner Avenue in the DH2A sub-area.
all right, I have motion and support. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, we are now moving on to Planning Commission discussion. I think we're getting an update on the Community Master Plan implementation.
All right. Thought I would present from here since it's easier to look at all of you instead of keep craning my neck one way or another. Because today I wanted to have a discussion, providing you with a little bit of an update on where we are at relative to the implementation of the Community Master Plan. And importantly, part of that implementation, of course, is an update or a rewrite of the city's zoning ordinance. And I'm requesting a little bit of discussion and feedback or input on the direction that we are currently heading in. So I will do the presentation today, but you'll see familiar faces. Both Leila Zlani and Elizabeth Zeller will be handling some of the day-to-day project management of the zoning ordinance rewrite specifically. Of course, Leila, project management for the community master plan and the subsequent implementation generally. So you'll see them take future presentations to assist me. So today, as I said, I wanted to break this out into two parts, giving you a very brief overview of where we are at with the implementation of the community master plan, which is an ongoing discussion as well with other city departments, and then of course an update to the zoning ordinance, talking about scheduling, some of the immediate next steps, and maybe some of the longer term items that we are currently planning for. So the community master plan, of course, that would be familiar to all of you, and I think if nope. Go here. I don't know if it'll work. But what we've done is take the plan and put it in a more digestible fashion. And so we've used some story mapping that we talked about during the adoption phase of the project, but many of you may not have yet seen it. So on our website is a story map of the plan itself. And the idea is to help make it digestible for individuals that are using the plan or wishing to reference, whether it's to respond to a project or because they have a project that they are proposing before you. Of course, there are also videos that were done as part of this for each chapter, and looking for either community members and or steering committee members that can provide their perspective or their overview of what each of the chapters' intentions are, the objectives were, the goals were. And so we wanted to make sure that we really humanized the plan to the extent possible and also made it a community plan and not just a government document that we would only reference. So a lot of great information there that I think we're pretty proud of. So in your spare time, you might wish to peruse that and go through, and certainly we would welcome your feedback there. The next tool that we're working on right now that's in development, hopefully we'll have it in the second quarter of 2025, and that would be available on our website. And really it's a dashboard. And there's a number of reasons for this, of course. When we first began the process, when we were in phase one, the pre-planning phase, when we had neighborhood facilitators, one of the number one questions we got was, well, what happened with the 2002 plan? And we quickly realized that as a department, we were pretty remiss. We knew in our heads, and we were able to create that, tree of life document that was provided. There was a lot of really good things happening there that had happened from the plan itself, but there was no place where an individual could go to learn what that is. And I think that that's really important for a number of reasons. Of course, transparency and accountability are critical. As we moved through the adoption phase of the plan, one of the number one things we heard, first of all, complimenting the process, which was fabulous, but one of the number one things we heard was, we expect that this will be implemented. The community worked really hard on it. They spent a lot of time sharing their thoughts and ideas, and they really pushed both myself as well as the City Commission to make sure that we have strategies in place that hold us accountable to the plan that they helped co-create. So that's really important, I think, for us to be as transparent as possible. So this is a dashboard that will be, we'll be looking to launch here in the next few months. We're looking at other models around the country for what tools can be used. And of course, ideally, we would have the current software that we could use in-house. The next part of the implementation, of course, is the update to the city zoning ordinance. I don't think that we're going to need a wholesale rewrite. We're not starting from scratch. There's currently a lot of Band-Aids. I think I've previously heard, the idea of a Frankenstein ordinance, where we've done a number of amendments and sometimes errors happen, logic breaks down, it's not well connected through other sections. So we really need to make sure that we update that to clean up the document, make it a lot more user-friendly. We also want to make sure, of course, that we rewrite sections that need to be rewritten to embed the recommendations of the land use strategies of the community master plan, and then making it a more user-friendly document. There's a lot more tools out there that we can use so that it's not just a large 300-odd page PDF or document that somebody would have to go through, but there's a lot of good mapping tools that can be used where you can click on a parcel and up pops all of the relevant zoning sections that one would want to know if they were looking to either purchase a property or develop a property. So that's all part of the update that we're planning. But of course, before we get to the actual written language, we need to make sure that we continue to level set about what a zoning ordinance is, some of the limitations that we are under when it comes to land use legislation in the state of Michigan that may or may not be in place for other states across the country, and where do we get our authority from? So these are some of the things, concepts that we have to consider, like the enabling legislation when we rewrite our zoning ordinance. We need to, of course, look at our community master plan. We want to look at our area-specific plans, and then any other laws that might be relevant that then feed into the creation of the zoning ordinance rewrite. So that's one of those fundamental things that I'll be talking about as we move forward, because what we have found in any sort of engagement or educational opportunities around planning and zoning generally is that we need to continuously bring back about what is zoning and why is it important and what are some of the benefits of it, but also some of the limitations. This is our overall schedule. The next few slides, if it's okay, I'm going to go through all of them in their entirety. There's not that many, I promise, and then circle back to get feedback, because I want you to have the full picture of where we're going before we start breaking it apart. So this is the tentative schedule that we've created. We are looking at phase one, of course. We're in the very beginning stages of this. We're looking to provide City Commission with an update or a briefing on the implementation of the community master plan, looking to form a technical advisory committee. We need to issue a request for proposal or a request for qualifications to bring on a consultant to help support the work that we're doing. And we also want to talk with the community, both the design professional community as well as our neighborhoods and our business districts, and find out what's working, what's not, and then do a little bit of what we're calling a road show, which is that introduction of what is zoning, the things that I've just mentioned. Phase two will be the meat and potatoes of the rewrite, where we'll really get in and begin drafting the plan. That will be once the consultant is on board to help support that work, and then looking to develop an engagement strategy that will meet the needs of the community, but also likely focus on testing different concepts that are recommended through the community master plan. So for example, one of the recommendations of the plan is to be more flexible in terms of the types of uses that are allowed in a residential zone district. And there was quite a bit of support for these small neighborhood shops or businesses that are embedded within the neighborhood. And so that concept is in the plan and was well supported, but now how do we develop requirements around that? Is there minimum lot areas, is there maximum square footage? Are there tight street typologies that we want to tie that to? So some of that detail needs to be fleshed out, and we really are going to be looking for engagement or input around those ideas. So engagement, of course, will look a little bit different as part of a zoning ordinance versus a community master plan. Community master plan engagement's very broad in general, where zoning is far more technical and specific to the recommendations or the requirements that are put in the ordinance. And of course, our end goal is to provide a document that is well-loved, well-supported by the community and both the Planning Commission and City Commission, and we'd be looking for adoption hopefully in the spring of 2027. And that time frame aligns with the budget strategy that is currently in place. I mentioned a technical advisory committee. My plan right now is to put together a team of individuals that work with our ordinance, that have knowledge about what a zoning ordinance is and how it would be used. So these are the I want to say types of individuals that would be part of that technical advisory committee. So of course, having a member of the Planning Commission, I believe Commissioner Swem had previously expressed interest in it, having a member of the Board of Zoning Appeals, subject matter experts from city staff, like the building official and or his designee, and then looking at other sectors of our community that work with our ordinance in different ways. So having a member that could represent the business community, a local developer, a small-scale housing developer, an emerging developer, a land use attorney. So these are all different types of persons that we think would provide tremendous value as we begin to develop the actual code so that they can provide the feedback about how that code would affect them and or their community. So I'll circle back to that slide because I really want feedback there. I mentioned one of the next major steps, of course, is for us to begin drafting the request for proposal or request for qualifications. I think we're still vacillating a little bit on that. But the idea, of course, is to solicit support from a consultant that could help support city staff and the Planning Commission, City Commission, as we develop the code. We will be happy to share that with the commission when it's ready, but ultimately that would be released by the City Commission. One of the other ideas we have is to issue some sort of survey. We collect a lot of data, as you know, in the Development Center, and it includes a database of individuals who submit applications for our services. And so we think that asking questions of them about how they use the code, what processes are benefiting or hindering their projects, code sections perhaps that they really struggle with or think could be eliminated or enhanced. We want that type of feedback. So this will be more targeted to the design professional community, the people that use the code that could provide that very specific feedback that we're looking for. So we have a list of architects, civil engineers, developers, et cetera, contractors that will be submitting that too. We actually had a really good response rate when we did our customer service survey back in 2023 with a similar list. So hopefully they will be as kind, giving us their time and providing that feedback. And I assume most would see the value in why they would want to provide us with that feedback as we move through this process. So those questions will be developed and happy to share and get your feedback on them as we complete this task. We're also looking at, again, what we're calling a roadshow, kind of an educational opportunity for our community, really making sure that we bridge what is the zoning or what was the community master plan, what are the recommendations of that, and then what is the relationship between the plan and the zoning ordinance, and understanding what is a setback, what does by right mean, what does it mean when a project has to go to Planning Commission for special land use. So we want to have those conversations with the community before we get into, and now we're going to change it, and what would that look like. We think that who's at the table is important, so we'll be asking for your feedback on this list and ideas to expand it if appropriate. And I'll circle back to that slide in a moment as well. The content of the roadshow, of course, would be about where do we get our authority? How does this align with plans? What are the components of a zoning ordinance? So think about when we think about our articles of parking, transportation, mobility, housing, commercial districts, et cetera. We want to talk about historical impacts of zoning. When we have large lot zoning, we have environmental justice concerns that we have considered as part of our land use considerations, and also segregation, of course. Zoning was a huge part of the segregation of our community. And then looking at trade-offs. We talked quite a bit extensively about that during the housing reform conversations about, the need for housing, but also balancing what is good land use strategies around things like parking and green space. Phase 2, that will be hopefully later this summer, early fall, where we're actually getting into the specific land use strategies, the ordinance writing. This would take place when the consultant is on board, looking for feedback from the community. And we also think it would be important to report out on the housing policy text amendments that we adopted last spring to kind of answer that question about, well, what happened with the last round of amendments that you made, because those were fairly extensive and impactful, or powerful, I should say. And so we want to really help understand what was the impact. Did it go far enough? Do we go further? Understanding whether minor adjustments are needed to ease implementation or administration of those sections. So that's another component of this process that we think is really important for us to respond to. So with that, I will circle back to the relevant slides where I'm requesting your feedback on, and certainly open to discussion of other slides if you have comments or thoughts. So any questions on the schedule, the timeline that we're under? No? All right. Technical Advisory Committee. So this was the list that internally we have come up with. Again, this would be a technical advisory committee that would be supporting city staff. So if we think that these general sectors of the community would be helpful, then city staff will brainstorm ideas on the who might be available and able to provide support throughout this entire process. Of course, we do want some consistency where possible, understanding that there might be some inevitable turnover with that.
I don't see a contractor representative on this list. I'm wondering if that would add value.
I would say yes. Thank you.
Can you, so this process, and even the past slide, it's a long process, right? So is it fair to say that the community master plan, sort of, I don't know, provides an overview of where we're headed, but this is like the nuts and bolts of how it works, right?
Yes.
So I think one of the things that maybe I'll just ask is, how do you, with a large group of people who all have, this is a great list of folks, all have opinions, and how do you avoid not revisiting the master plan as you go through this process and not relitigating some of the ideas and things like that, right? Because it feels like what we're doing is taking a process where we spent a lot of time, had a lot of public input, and turning it into the legal document to execute it. And I just wonder, when you have all these folks here who don't have any more, expertise in turning a concept into a legal document than maybe I do, like, how do you avoid not getting off track and not re-discussing all the points?
Yep. So good question. In my opinion, it's going to be strong leadership, both from city staff as well as the consultant. We are not relitigating the concepts that are within the community master plan. That document was well supported by the community. It was written by the community, and I think it would be our job as city staff to make sure when we're meeting with an individual who would be a candidate, if you will, for these list of 16, 17 groups, that we have that conversation about understanding what is their role, what is their responsibility, and what are some of the limitations of this role, and can they accept that? And then throughout the process, reminding the participants of this that we are not redoing the community master plan. I think that's going to be a struggle with our community as well, quite honestly. There will be people who didn't participate in the community master plan process that wish to add or subtract recommendations within the plan, and that's simply not part of this process.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that. I think my concern as you went through all of the processes, it's a lot, and it's a lot of another huge lift of public input. I guess I would question whether that's really necessary in the robust manner in which you're proposing it here, right? I feel like we're on the plan you proposed is on the far end of sort of a public engagement perspective on how this gets executed versus just simply hiring a consultant to rewrite the ordinance independently of the public and saying, now this ordinance says what your master plan wanted it to say,
Yeah.
right? I mean, those are two very opposite ends. I'm just curious how you ended up here in the balance of how that goes.
Yep. I think because I don't know what I don't know, I agree with you. We could probably capably write a zoning ordinance that would implement the recommendations of the community master plan. But I think that there's tremendous value in how those requirements are practically applied. And I think that an architect or a civil engineer, for example, even in meetings, my meetings with them, understanding the practical application of these codes, is it really having the intended outcome? I think that individuals that could be on this list provide that value to me. And so I think of building heights, for example, when we were rewriting the downtown height requirements. For me to pick a building height that I think is appropriate feels a little bit arbitrary because I don't have a full appreciation for the cost-benefit analysis or the cost of construction, where if I say 16 floors is the maximum number that would be appropriate based on the patterns of development, Brian's going to look at me and say, well, Kristen, if you let me go to 18, the building code and how that intersects and the cost of construction makes that a far more reasonable project that will pencil out. And so that's the kind of feedback. I keep picking on you today, Brian, I'm sorry. You're my target today, apparently. But there's tremendous value in his knowledge and your knowledge as well to provide us with that practical, of how the practical application of these requirements, how they play out.
I think that's a good question, but I like this because in some ways, unlike the Planning Commission, this seems more like reactive to people with boots on the ground in the community who have encountered, well, that doesn't really explain this, that, and the other thing, or can you clarify this, or give you examples, which I don't ever think this was done in the last one, and I think it's a way to just check the reality of how the ordinance would work with these people that are in the community that have to work with it.
And if I could be so bold to say, like, my intent, although I'm asking for your feedback on the 16 or 17 groups of people, this is not going to be the same process as appointing a steering committee for the community master plan. And so city staff will be looking for individuals that we work with, that we know have good experience within the city and with our ordinance, to be serving on, to be representing these groups of people.
Yeah, I think the one kind of different level of engagement that y'all are talking about is the Zoning 101 Roadshow, which I do think should be a good kind of educational opportunity for people in our community to understand what zoning is and what it isn't. I'm wondering if you're planning to, I guess before I say that, going back to your question, like ultimately, City Commission is going to have to adopt this, right? And they are going to want to see engagement from the public. They're going to want to, if the quote-unquote first time that people are hearing about this is at the City Commission public hearing, that's not, I don't think, what we want either.
And I think it's, as we get into the actual, the phase 2 or the writing, being strategic in our engagement is going to be important. We're not going to be asking the same questions we asked as part of the community master plan. We're going to be very specific. So the example I gave about, allowing for non-residential uses in residential neighborhoods and having options for individuals to react to. So it'll be much more narrowly tailored than a broad range of, hey, do you like the idea of commercial uses in the residential? I mean, that decision's been made. So now how do we implement it?
Yeah, I wrote down one other question maybe that I should have asked first, because it maybe would have informed my second question better. But are there limitations now that the master plan has been adopted? Are there things that we or the city cannot do until the ordinance are adopted? And part of what I'm wondering is this timeline of essentially 2 years now to adopt, the new ordinances. Are there limitations before then that
Yep.
Or can we kind of dive straight into the master plan as it sits today?
So a plan is a plan, and it's a legally required document to support the zoning ordinance. But the zoning ordinance is the law. So there could very well be recommendations within the plan that can't be done today. The example I gave about non-residential uses in commercial district, or non-residential uses in residential zone districts is an example. The code isn't in place to allow it. Therefore, there's limitations on the effectiveness of the implementation of the plan until the zoning ordinance is rewritten.
Okay, and is it fair to, like, the housing text amendments that we did do are some of those ones that we kind of fast forwarded, so we could do
Yes.
them quicker? Okay, fair
Yep,
enough.
and we, if you recall, we knew that right from the beginning, that housing was critical. And within the request for proposal, we talked about the opportunity, if there was an opportunity and it made sense to advance housing recommendations because of the urgency that was being expressed, we would do that. And I'm not saying that there won't be updates that we couldn't make between now and 2027. I don't think it's fair to say nothing changes until we rewrite it. There might be changes that make sense that are scalable for staff to handle.
So I think I like your word use of arbitrary and how it relates to who's going to end up advising some of this from the Technical Advisory Committee. Because in a lot of discussions I've had, the big question is why? Why was that done, right? And it wasn't from a position of experience with the zoning ordinance. In many cases, it was just somebody's personal opinion that the building height needed to be 8 stories and shouldn't go higher than that. And then the people using the ordinance say why, right? So it becomes, to avoid the arbitrary, like you're saying, I think is very important.
Yep. Any other thoughts? Planning Commission member, we don't have to decide today, but I guess I would ask how you would like to make that decision, whether it's a nomination, a vote, a volunteer. That's something that I'd like the Planning Commission to make that decision.
I'm comfortable with a volunteer if, I think Commissioner Swimmett already said he would.
I'm still interested, so if you'll
I'm
have me, I'll
comfortable
do it.
with the volunteer also, and this, depending particularly on the time of it, somebody needs to, I think, be weighing in on whether they have the time.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move forward with having Brian on that list. Of course, throughout the process, the entire Planning Commission will be receiving updates and draft language as, milestones are hit. So you'll still be part of this process, even if you're not as active as maybe a Technical Advisory Committee member.
So then there'll be more legitimacy to you calling on Brian all the time,
Calling on, picking on.
our new technical advisor.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Request for proposal, I don't think I need any feedback on that. Of course, happy to share the proposal as it's drafted, but that typically hasn't been a role of the Planning Commission. I think we have a good grasp on what you'd be looking for. User survey, looking for feedback on whether you think that this, well, I guess I do think it would be valuable, so I hope you agree with that. And then maybe if you want to formulate some questions that you think would be helpful, we'd be happy to receive those via email or if you have any ideas right now.
Well, I think it would be, I'm not interested in designing it, maybe others are, but I would be very interested in getting that feedback as well. So I think that would be helpful as we move forward too.
Okay, thank you. So what we're affectionately calling our roadshow, this is educational on what is the relationship between the plan and the ordinance, why do we zone. This will be one of those carefully crafted presentations so that we make it clear that we have a plan. We're not redoing the plan, we're implementing that plan. So making sure that that message is carried throughout. We do have a neighborhood association collaborative that is comprised of leadership of each neighborhood association. We believe that one general meeting in each ward would be also appropriate. We think that going to business corridor, business districts or corridor improvement authorities would also be helpful. And then we, at the Development Center, do have a lunch and learn. Typically, that is tailored towards more of the design professional community that engages our services, utilizes the code. But we felt like this was a pretty good list. Want to make sure that we, of course, appreciate that not all of our community is represented by a neighborhood, which is why the one meeting in each ward is beneficial. Not every business is represented by an association, so same thought process there. But are there other ideas of ways that we can bring this message to our community?
I guess I'm wondering if maybe the commission nights out is an opportunity. Obviously not the same kind of workshop that you would have with these groups, but having some boards or.
Yep. Thank you.
You know, I mean, these are time-consuming, I know, and I think you've targeted, you know, many of the right kinds of organizations. But I think also, I wonder if places like the Rotary and Economic Club, I mean, this is a lot of work that you put into it, and I really think it's it's good for the public to see. I mean, leaders in our community, other than just these folks who are leaders too, but you know, what our city is doing and the hard work and future that they're looking at. And whatever way we can get across that we don't need a parking space in front of everything and educating people, but I'm being facetious on that. But you know, this is really an incredible work at some point.
Yep.
That you might even want a broader audience. Just out there.
I appreciate that. I mean, it won't be within our capacity to go individually to every association, to every business district, to every, you know, nonprofit or realtor shop. So we're trying to hit locations where we know there's maybe a larger gathering of people.
I have two thoughts. First, on the subject of gatherings, although you said you cannot go to every association, let me just put out there, but you can shut it down. If an audience that matters is the construction or design community, I would suggest AIA for the architects. And there's a number of associations for the construction community, like the American Subcontractors Association, Associated Builders and Contractor, or Construction Allies in Action, or maybe a combined meeting for them if that's valuable to you. From a process standpoint, it's reminding me a lot of the work that I did when I was on the school board for Grand Rapids Public in developing our facilities master plan. And in that outreach work, we were very intentional about choosing which schools we were in, as we identified that those would most likely be the schools that were impacted. So I'm wondering if there's a way in this work to identify locations to host the meetings that could most likely be impacted, so that individuals are driving through a residential neighborhood, maybe it's housed in a school or a church or a park, so they can best envision what may change as a result of that, as a recommendation.
Thank you. Perhaps we can connect offline about the AIA and the Contractor Association, that I could get some contact information. Thank you.
Yeah, I would suggest you could probably put those organizations to work for you. And I mean, you might not have to go to them. I would suggest that we make them do some work and some outreach. And I can help with the AIA.
Great. Okay. These were the contents of the roadshow. Don't know if there's any reactions there to this. Okay. And this is more just an update on where we would go within Phase 2, so I don't think there's a lot to react to there unless there's, you have different ideas. And that was it. Anything else that you'd like to add?
I really like this, thank you. The thoughtfulness of, you go through all that work, you've got the plan, now the implementation, and sometimes those things just fall by the wayside in the communication. I think is still as important as you carry through on that. So I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do too. And going back to even how user-friendly the story map is for the master plan, I did just randomly find it when I was trying to send someone else information about the community master plan. And so, and how quickly that was put up. Like typically, I don't know, things can be pretty laggy between when a document is adopted and when kind of a user-friendly version goes up. So thanks for all y'all's work on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I do appreciate the lesson with the words plan and law that came out of the question, because I get asked all the time, about, well, we have a new community master plan now, that should be the deal, and I never really had the word, I explain it because common sense, I kind of know there's still a zoning ordinance that's out there, but to say, this is the plan, and then there's the law that has to be adapted to the plan now, which takes time.
Yep.
So that's helpful, I think.
Great. And that's the kind of messaging, I think, in our roadshow idea that we need to stress. And then, of course, there's other laws like the Rent Control Act. There's other laws that are applicable that inform that will inform how we can zone for our community that will also have to be considered that I think sometimes are pretty challenging. Like the Rent Control Act, which means that we can't do inclusionary zoning in the state of Michigan. We can't do exactions in the state. We can't do community benefit agreement for a land use consideration. So there's these limitations that we're under, like I've mentioned, that maybe aren't in place for other states that can be really challenging because you hear about them in the news, but it's not something that we can do based on our enabling legislation currently. And I think.
Yeah, I also think bringing on a consultant who probably says, well, this works and, has background in how these things work in a lot of communities. And that's another source of input and expertise. I think that'll be time-saving than having to start from scratch.
Yeah, I'm excited about the different tools that are available. I think it's challenging and it's inappropriate that community should have to call a city staff planner to interpret the code or a design professional. Like we should have a code that is far more user-friendly, that's far more intuitive. We're certainly happy to help and want to explore solutions with individuals, but it shouldn't be so confusing that people get frustrated. And unfortunately, I think we didn't have the same technological advances that we have today when we wrote the code in 2008. And so I'd like to really focus on that and take advantage of it. And I think the interactive mapping tool is one example of how we can get there. All right. Well, thank you so much. Oh.
One more thing, did we want any specific recommendations on individuals?
Oh. Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. So if you did have recommendations on individuals, please just email that to me and we can reach out. Understanding that there might be some time constraints or limitations, we would probably want more than a couple of individuals that we could reach out to. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, anything else for Planning Commission discussion today? Okay, then I'll move to public comment. I'll open up for public comment. If anyone wants to speak during public comment, feel free. Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment, and we're adjourned. Thank you.